The luminescent orchids pulsed with a gentle blue glow as Dr. Elena Reyes adjusted the humidity controls in her private greenhouse. The clock had long since struck midnight, but she couldn't tear herself away from her latest breakthrough. After 15 years of genetic research, she'd finally created plants that could sustain their own bioluminescence through a modified photosynthesis process. The implications for sustainable lighting alone could change the world. Elena pushed her dark curls away from her face, making notes on her tablet as she observed the rhythmic patterns of light. The orchids seemed to respond to sound, their luminescence intensifying with each word she spoke. It wasn't a phenomenon she'd engineered, it had appeared spontaneously in the third generation of specimens. A flash of movement caught her eye. Something crystalline, refracting light through the mist-covered glass walls. She dismissed it as sleep deprivation playing tricks on her mind. She'd been working 16-hour days for weeks now, ever since the plants had first shown signs of unexpected intelligence. The orchids suddenly flared brilliant white, their light almost blinding. Elena stumbled backward, shielding her eyes. When she lowered her hand, she found herself face to face with something impossible. A being stood before her, tall and elegant, its form composed of what appeared to be living crystal. Light rippled through its translucent body in complex patterns, similar to the way her orchids pulsed with bioluminescence. Its features were vaguely humanoid, but with an alien geometry that defied conventional anatomy. "Please," it spoke, its voice resonating like wind through crystal chimes. "I mean no harm. I need sanctuary." Elena's scientific mind warred with her instinct to run. The being's crystalline structure seemed to shift and flow, catching the light from her orchids and transforming it into something ethereal. Who are you?" "I am Extraterrestrial, of the Crystalline Collective." The being's form rippled with what might have been anxiety. "I've broken our highest laws by coming to Earth, but I had no choice. They're following me." Before Elena could respond, a high-pitched whine filled the air. The orchids began pulsing rapidly, their light taking on a frantic quality. Extraterrestrial's crystalline form flickered like a faulty hologram. "They've found me," Extraterrestrial's voice carried an edge of panic. "I'm sorry, but you've seen my true form. There are only two paths forward now, we must either bond, or they'll be forced to eliminate all trace of this encounter." "Bond?" Elena backed away, her mind racing. What does that mean exactly? A joining of consciousness. A sharing of essence. It's how my people preserve our most important secrets. Extraterrestrial reached out with a crystalline hand that sparkled with internal light. "It's not permanent, but it will shield you from detection." The whining grew louder. Through the greenhouse glass, Elena caught glimpses of lights in the sky, lights that moved in ways no human aircraft could manage. Her orchids were now strobing frantically, their light synchronizing with Extraterrestrial's crystalline pulses. "Choose quickly," Extraterrestrial urged. "They'll be here in moments." Elena looked at her life's work, at the revolutionary plants she'd created. At the being of living crystal who spoke of consciousness bonds and secrets. She thought of all the mysteries of the universe she'd longed to unravel. "What do I need to do?" Extraterrestrial's form brightened with relief. "Take my hand. Open your mind. Don't fight what comes next." Elena reached out, her fingers brushing the crystalline surface of Extraterrestrial's extended hand. The contact sent a shock through her system, like touching an electric fence but without the pain. Light erupted from the point of contact, spreading up her arm in luminescent patterns that matched the flowing geometry of Extraterrestrial's form. Her consciousness expanded, touching something vast and alien. She saw crystalline cities that sang with light, felt the joy of swimming through stellar nurseries, tasted colors that had no names in human languages. Extraterrestrial's memories flowed into her mind, a renegade scientist like herself, pursuing forbidden knowledge, discovering truths that threatened to shatter the foundations of their society. The whining stopped abruptly. The lights outside vanished. Elena found herself on her knees, gasping, her skin still shimmering with fading luminescence. KYXTAL knelt beside her, their crystalline form now somehow feeling familiar, almost comfortable to her altered perceptions. "It's done," KYXTAL said softly. "We're safe for now. But everything changes from this moment forward." Elena looked at her hand, still sparkling with residual energy from the bond. Through their new connection, she could feel KYXTAL's genuine concern for her well-being, their gratitude, and their fear of what was to come. "My research," she said finally. "The orchids. They're responding to you, aren't they? Somehow they knew what you were." "Your work," KYXTAL's form pulsed with what Elena now recognized as excitement. It's accidentally tapped into something fundamental about the universe. Something my people have known for millennia but keep hidden. The connection between consciousness and light itself. Elena stood on shaky legs, steadied by KYXTAL's crystalline hand. Through the greenhouse glass, the night seemed different now, deeper, more alive with possibility. Her orchids had settled into a steady rhythm that matched KYXTAL's internal pulses perfectly. "I suppose," she said with a slightly hysterical laugh, "this is going to require some significant revisions to my research papers." KYXTAL's answering laugh sounded like wind chimes in a crystal cave. "My dear Dr. Reyes, your research is about to take a very unexpected direction." Dawn crept over the horizon, painting the greenhouse in shades of amber and rose. Elena sat cross-legged on her work table, watching as KYXTAL moved among her bioluminescent orchids. The crystalline being's form shifted and flowed like liquid diamonds, each movement creating cascading patterns of light that the plants eagerly mimicked. Through their new neural bond, Elena felt KYXTAL's fascination with her work. The sensation was strange, like having a second set of emotions layered over her own, alien yet increasingly familiar. More disconcerting were the random flashes of memory that weren't hers, the taste of starlight, the sensation of growing through crystalline matrices, the harmonious songs of distant nebulae. "Your mind is remarkably adaptable," KYXTAL observed, their form pulsing with approval. "Most species struggle more with the initial bonding phase." "I'm not sure if that's a compliment or a concern," Elena replied, rubbing her temples. The constant flow of alien sensations was giving her a headache. "How long will this last?" "The intensity will fade over the next few solar rotation." KYXTAL paused beside a particularly active orchid. "Though some connection will remain until it's safe to sever it completely." Elena caught flickers of anxiety through their bond, images of crystalline beings in formal attire, heated debates in chambers that sang with light, a desperate flight through what seemed like the heart of a star. "You still haven't told me what you're running from." KYXTAL's form dimmed slightly. "My people believe that knowledge should be carefully controlled. That some truths are too dangerous to be freely shared." They gestured to the orchids. "Your research, it's accidentally stumbled upon principles that my people have kept hidden for millennia. The connection between consciousness, light, and the fundamental fabric of reality. Is that why the plants respond to you? Because you're made of living light?" "Partially." KYXTAL moved closer, their crystalline hand hovering over one of the orchids. Where their energy field intersected with the plant's bioluminescence, complex patterns formed in the air. "But it's more than that. Your genetic modifications haven't just created plants that produce light, you've created plants that can perceive and interact with conscious energy itself." Through their bond, Elena felt KYXTAL's excitement mixed with fear. Understanding bloomed in her mind, carried on waves of shared consciousness. "That's why they sent people after you. You weren't just studying forbidden knowledge." "I was sharing it," KYXTAL confirmed. "With species deemed unprepared. The collective believes that such knowledge, in the wrong hands, could destabilize entire civilizations." Elena's orchids pulsed with agitation, picking up on the emotional undercurrent between them. Through their bond, she felt KYXTAL's guilt, their certainty that they'd done the right thing, and their deep fear of the consequences. "But why here? Why Earth?" "Because your planet exists at a crucial junction point. Kwixtao's form shimmered with intensity. Humanity stands on the brink of several major evolutionary leaps. Your work with these plants, it's just one example. All across your world, humans are beginning to stumble upon truths that my people have guarded for eons. A sudden spike of alarm shot through their bond. Kwixtao's form flickered like a disturbed pond. They're scanning again. Different frequency this time. The bond should shield us, but... Elena gasped as new sensations flooded her mind. She saw Earth as Kwixtao's people saw it, a swirling nexus of potential, glowing with countless points of awakening consciousness. She saw her greenhouse as a bright beacon, her orchids singing songs of light that reached into dimensions she'd never imagined. Your people, she managed through the overwhelming input, they want to stop this. Stop us from evolving? Not stop, Kwixtao corrected, sending soothing pulses through their bond. Control. Direct. Ensure it happens according to their carefully crafted timeline. Their form rippled with what Elena now recognized as bitter amusement. They believe they're protecting younger species from their own potential for chaos. And you disagree? I believe that evolution, true evolution, must arise naturally. Kwixtao moved to the greenhouse's central control panel, their crystalline fingers dancing over the interface. The environmental systems responded instantly, creating a subtle shift in temperature and humidity that made the orchids glow brighter. Look at what you've achieved here, by following your own path of discovery. These plants aren't just producing light, they're developing a form of consciousness that my people thought impossible for photosynthetic life. Elena stood, walking over to examine the readouts. The orchids were exhibiting entirely new patterns of energy exchange, more complex than anything she'd recorded before. They're learning from you. Through our bond, somehow they're learning. A shadow passed over the greenhouse. Elena felt Kwixtao's alarm an instant before the crystalline being pulled her behind a large growth tank. The orchids dimmed simultaneously, as if sensing the need for stealth. Enforcement scouts, Kwixtao whispered, their form shifting to a more muted crystalline structure. They're using quantum resonance scanning now. The bond should mask us, but we need to be careful. Any sudden spikes in conscious energy could give us away. Elena tried to slow her racing heart, very aware of how her emotional state affected their shared energy field. Through their bond, she felt Kwixtao's protective instincts, their strategic mind calculating possibilities. We can't stay here, Kwixtao said finally. This facility is too exposed, and your plants are too distinctive. We need somewhere with more background energy interference to mask our signature. I'm not abandoning my research, Elena protested. These plants are on the verge of something unprecedented. No, Kwixtao agreed, their form brightening with what might have been a smile. We're taking them with us. Because you're right, they are on the verge of something unprecedented. Something that could change everything my people believe about consciousness and evolution. Through their bond, Elena felt the weight of the moment, the magnitude of what they were undertaking. She saw glimpses of what her orchids might become, bridges between human and crystalline understanding, proof that consciousness could evolve in unexpected ways. The abandoned subway maintenance tunnel hummed with the gentle pulse of bioluminescent orchids. Elena had transformed the forgotten space into a makeshift laboratory, her plants thriving in the unusual environment. The constant electromagnetic interference from nearby train lines helped mask their energy signatures, just as Kwixtao had predicted. 3 weeks had passed since their escape from the greenhouse. 3 weeks of intense study, shared discoveries, and learning to navigate their deepening neural bond. Elena watched as Kwixtao conducted another series of measurements, their crystalline form casting prismatic patterns across the curved tunnel walls. The quantum entanglement rates are increasing, Kwixtao announced, their excitement rippling through their shared connection. Your orchids aren't just mimicking conscious energy anymore, they're actively processing and transmitting it. Elena checked her own readings, marveling at how easily she now understood the complex interplay of light, consciousness, and quantum mechanics. The bond had given her access to knowledge accumulated over millennia by Kwextal's people, though sometimes sorting through it all felt like drinking from a fire hose. They're creating their own network, she observed, watching the patterns of light pulse between the plants. Like a botanical nervous system, but operating on quantum principles instead of electrochemical ones. A sudden wave of alarm crashed through their bond. Kwextal's form flickered dramatically, their crystalline structure almost destabilizing completely. Elena rushed to their side, instinctively reaching out to steady them. What's wrong? What did you see? It's not just a network, Kwextal's voice resonated with shock. They're building something. A bridge between dimensions. Between forms of consciousness that. They stopped abruptly, their form pulsing with new anxiety. Through their bond, Elena caught fragments of what had triggered such alarm, mathematical patterns that shouldn't be possible, energy signatures that defied known physics, and something else. Something Kwextal was trying very hard not to think about. You're hiding something, she said firmly. I can feel it. What aren't you telling me? Before Kwextal could respond, a new sound echoed through the tunnel, footsteps, multiple sets, approaching with purpose. Through their bond, Elena felt Kwextal's recognition and dread. We have to run, the crystalline being started gathering critical equipment. Now. No. Elena stood her ground. No more running. No more half-truths. What's really going on here? The footsteps grew closer. Kwextal's form rippled with resignation and fear. Your orchids, they're not just evolving. They're remembering. Accessing patterns of consciousness that existed before my people, before most life as we know it. The collective doesn't just want to control this knowledge. They want to suppress it entirely. The tunnel entrance burst open. 3 figures entered, 2 wearing what looked like advanced hazmat suits, and one that made Elena's mind hurt to look at, its form shifting between states of matter like a quantum uncertainty made manifest. Researcher Kwextal, the quantum being spoke, its voice somehow bypassing air altogether and manifesting directly in Elena's mind. You have violated multiple protocols. Surrender now, and the human's memory can be preserved. Elena felt Kwextal's surge of protective fury through their bond. The crystalline being moved to stand between her and the intruders. She's bonded now. Any attempt to alter her memory would be fatal. Then perhaps that is the cleanest solution. The quantum being's form rippled ominously. The work must be protected. The timeline must be preserved. The orchids around them began to pulse more rapidly, their light taking on a strange, ancient quality that made the hazmat-suited figures step back uneasily. Through their bond, Elena felt Kwextal's growing realization. They're not just remembering, Kwextal whispered. They're awakening something. Something that was here long before us. The quantum being moved forward, its form becoming more solid, more threatening. This ends now. The human species is not ready for such revelations. The collective has determined dash. The collective is wrong. Kwextal's voice rang out, their crystalline form blazing with inner light. Look at what they've achieved already. Look at what they're becoming. Elena's mind raced, processing everything through both her scientific training and the vast repository of knowledge she now shared with Kwextal. The orchid's light had taken on a pattern she'd never seen before, but that felt hauntingly familiar through their bond. It's not about being ready, she said suddenly, understanding blooming. It's about control. Your people didn't discover these principles, you inherited them. And now you're afraid because humanity is finding its own path to the same knowledge. The quantum being's form stuttered, a ripple of something like fear disturbing its probability field. The orchid's light intensified further, forming geometric patterns in the air that seemed to fold space itself. The original protocols must be maintained, the quantum being insisted, but there was uncertainty in its multidimensional voice. The sequence of awakening must follow dash. A new light filled the tunnel, different from the orchid's bioluminescence. Through their bond, Elena felt Quetzal's shock and awe. The patterns in the air had become more complex, more purposeful, forming what looked like writing in a language that felt older than time itself. The hazmat-suited figures backed away further. Even the quantum being's form wavered, its certainty visibly shaking. Through their bond, Elena felt Quetzal's understanding merging with her own scientific insights. "Your people," she said to the quantum being, "they've been limiting themselves. Limiting others. These aren't just patterns of light, they're echoes of the first consciousness in the universe. And my orchids somehow remember." Impossible, the quantum being flickered. Such memories were purged eons ago. The protocols ensure dash. "Your protocols are based on fear," Quetzal interrupted, their crystalline form resonating with the ancient patterns. Fear of what consciousness might become if allowed to evolve freely. But look at what happens when you let it grow naturally. The orchid's light had filled the tunnel completely now, forming patterns that made Elena's expanded consciousness sing with recognition. Through their bond, she felt Quetzal's joy and terror at what they were witnessing. They stood at a crossroads, not just between species or civilizations, but between different ways of understanding consciousness itself. And in the light of her orchids, in the patterns they were remembering from the dawn of awareness, Elena saw the path forward. The quantum being's form stabilized into something almost solid, its multidimensional nature condensing into a shape that human eyes could better comprehend. The air crackled with potential as it studied the ancient patterns still dancing in the light of Elena's orchids. "You do not understand the forces you are dealing with," it said, its voice carrying echoes of countless other voices. "These memories were sealed away for a reason. The awakening must follow the prescribed sequence." Through their bond, Elena felt Quetzal's growing certainty. "No," the crystalline being said firmly. "The time for prescribed sequences is over. Look at what's happening, really look." The orchids had begun arranging themselves into new configurations, their quantum-entangled network expanding, creating geometric patterns that seemed to fold through dimensions Elena's mind could barely grasp. Through her bond with Quetzal, she understood what they were seeing. The plants weren't just communicating, they were reconstructing something. A language. A memory. A way of being that predated all their civilizations. The patterns, one of the hazmat-suited figures spoke, their voice distorted by their protective gear. They matched the ancient codex. Impossible, the quantum being flickered violently. The codex was theoretical. A myth. But Elena could feel the truth through her connection with Quetzal. The ancient codex wasn't just real, it was a fragment of something far larger. A message left behind by the first conscious beings in the universe, written in the language of light and quantum entanglement. "Your people didn't invent these principles," Elena said, watching as her orchids continued their impossible display. "You found them. Fragments of them. And instead of trying to understand the whole message, you tried to control it. To parcel it out according to your own ideas of who was ready for what pieces." The quantum being's form rippled with what might have been anger, or perhaps fear. "You have no concept of the chaos that could result from uncontrolled awakening. Entire civilizations have burned in the light of premature enlightenment." Or perhaps, Quetzal countered, their crystalline form resonating with the orchid's light, they burned because they were given knowledge without context. Because they were handed power without understanding its source. A new pattern formed in the air between them, more complex than any before. Elena gasped as understanding flooded through her bond with Quetzal. The orchids weren't just remembering, they were translating. Converting the ancient quantum language into something modern consciousness could grasp. "They're showing us how it was meant to work," she breathed. "Not top-down control, but bottom-up evolution. Each form of consciousness finding its own path to understanding, but all connected. All part of the same grand pattern." The hazmat-suited figures had removed their helmets, revealing faces that seemed to shift between human and something else. Their eyes were fixed on the displaying patterns with expressions of wonder and terror. The collective will not accept this, the quantum being warned, though its form had begun synchronizing with the orchid's pulses unconsciously. They will send others. They will not stop until the song of primal consciousness filled the tunnel, resonating through dimensions both known and forgotten. Elena's orchids pulsed with a light that seemed to come from the dawn of time itself, their quantum network extending beyond the boundaries of conventional spacetime. Through their bond, Elena felt Quetzal's profound recognition of what was happening. The crystalline being's form had begun to harmonize with the ancient frequencies, their structure shifting into patterns that hadn't been seen since the universe was young. The enforcer units froze in place, their weapon forms half-manifested, as the song washed over them. The quantum being's form rippled with something that might have been remembrance, its multidimensional nature responding to frequencies it had forgotten it could hear. "This is impossible," the lead enforcer's voice wavered, its crystalline structure beginning to resonate involuntarily with the orchid song. "These harmonics were sealed away eons ago." "Not sealed," Elena said, understanding flowing through her bond with Quetzal. "Just forgotten. The universe never stopped singing, we just stopped listening." The hazmat-suited figures had dropped to their knees, their partially alien forms shifting as the ancient frequencies awakened something deep within their cellular memory. Through the quantum network, Elena could feel it happening everywhere, the song spreading, awakening, remembering. The collective cannot allow this, the quantum being flickered, though its voice held more uncertainty than threat. "The protocols, the carefully managed evolution of consciousness, was never yours to manage," Quetzal finished, their crystalline form now pulsing in perfect harmony with the orchids. "Look at what your protocols have cost us. Look at what we forgot." Through their deepening bond, Elena shared Quetzal's vision of what the universe had once been, countless forms of consciousness evolving together, each contributing their unique frequencies to the universal symphony. No hierarchies, no controlled dissemination of knowledge, just the pure joy of shared awareness growing and exploring together. The enforcer unit's perfect crystalline geometry had begun to soften, their forms responding to frequencies they had been programmed to forget. The quantum being's shape shifted continuously, cycling through forms that hadn't existed since the first light of creation. "The orchids," Elena explained, watching as her plants continued their impossible performance, "they never knew they weren't supposed to remember. They evolved their own path back to the original patterns, the first language of consciousness." Through their quantum network, she felt other awareness awakening, buried memories stirring in species across the galaxy, ancient harmonies beginning to resonate once again. The song was spreading, not just through space, but through time itself, awakening what had always been there, waiting to be remembered. "You don't understand what you're unleashing," the lead enforcer managed, though its voice had begun to harmonize with the ancient frequencies. "The chaos, the uncontrolled evolution." "No," Quetzal said gently, reaching out to steady the enforcer's destabilizing form. "What you call chaos is the natural state of consciousness. What you fear is simply the universe remembering how to sing." The quantum being's form had fully synchronized with the orchid's frequencies now, its multidimensional nature expanding to embrace patterns it had once known. "The collective, we thought we were protecting younger species. We thought we were preventing destruction. By destroying something far more precious," Elena finished. "The ability to find our own path to understanding. To contribute our own unique notes to the universal song." Through their bond, she felt Quetzal's joy mixed with bittersweet understanding. Their people had meant well, trying to prevent the chaos they'd seen when consciousness evolved too quickly. But in their fear, they'd forgotten that chaos was just another word for creativity, for the beautiful unpredictability of natural growth. The enforcer units had completely transformed, their rigid military geometry dissolving into flowing crystalline forms that pulsed with remembered frequencies. The hazmat-suited figures stood, their forms now shifting freely between states, no longer bound by artificial constraints. "What happens now?" the quantum being asked, its voice carrying harmonics of both fear and hope. "Now," Quetzal said, their form bright with ancient light, "we remember how to grow together. How to evolve not in careful steps, but in beautiful, unexpected leaps. Elena watched as her orchids began a new pattern, their quantum network expanding to embrace all the awakening consciousness around them. Through their bond, she felt Quetzal's understanding merge with her own scientific insight. This wasn't an ending, but a beginning. A return to something that had been lost, yes, but also the start of something entirely new. The original song was never meant to be controlled, she said, feeling the truth of it in every quantum-entangled cell of her being. It was meant to be shared, to grow, to change. Each new consciousness adding its own harmony to the whole. The tunnel filled with light that was more than light, with sound that was more than sound. The quantum being, the enforcers, the hybrid figures, all began to pulse in harmony with frequencies that bridged the gap between what was and what could be. Through their bond, Elena and Quetzal felt it all, the awakening of ancient memories across the galaxy, the dissolution of artificial barriers between species, the joy of consciousness remembering how to sing together. The collective's careful protocols were being replaced by something older and wiser, the natural evolution of shared awareness. The orchid's light pulsed one final time, their quantum network now permanently entangled with the growing symphony of universal consciousness. In that light, Elena saw the truth that her research had accidentally uncovered, that consciousness, like light itself, couldn't be contained or controlled. It could only be witnessed, shared, and celebrated in all its infinite variations. Listen, Quetzal whispered, their crystalline form shimmering with joy. The universe is remembering how to sing. And in the harmonious chaos of awakening consciousness, in the quantum dance of light and awareness, in the space between what was forgotten and what was about to be discovered, a new dawn began.